Well, welcome to another edition of Veterans on the Front Porch. I'm your host, Clint Brown. Today I'm pleased to have as my guest, Frank Cartier. Frank,
Clint.
welcome to the show.
Thanks, Clint. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Now, you were a Marine.
Yes.
Okay, when did you get started? I mean, what prompted you to get into the Marine Corps?
Well, growing up, in the '80s, President Reagan was the president. He's kind of the, first president I really kind of remembered, and there was, a sense of patriotism and service, and I thought, I'm growing up in the greatest country in the world. I want to do something. Of course, when I joined, it was an all-volunteer service. There was no draft, and my bedroom growing up looked like a Marine recruiting office because every Marine poster that I could get, I had up on the walls, and so the recruiters didn't have to do anything for me. I showed up. I remember my recruiter's name, Sergeant Rod Coleman.
Really?
I do. And I walked in and well, I know you're a Navy guy, so I'll tell you this part of the story real quick. I grew up in Southern California. My parents are from New Hampshire, but my dad was stationed in the Air Force in Southern California, so I was born and raised out there. I came into New Hampshire when I got out of the service. The recruiters' offices in Torrance, California, they were in a strip mall, and they were all the services were there: Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. And I walked in, the Marines weren't there, so I went next door to the Navy. I'm like, hey, have you seen where the Marines are? And they said, of course, well, it's not our turn to babysit them. So they invited me to sit down and wait for the Marines, which I did for a little while. They tried to recruit me, but so anyways, the Marines show up. I say, I want to join the Marines. I'm 17 years old. I was a junior in high school. Finishing up my junior year, I enlisted actually in the delayed enlistment program between my junior and senior year.
Okay.
With my parents, because I was only 17, so they had to sign. My recruiter, Sergeant Rod Coleman, was an avionics guy on A4 Skyhawks. He worked on airplanes, and with my ASVAB scores and stuff like that, he tried to encourage me to go that route. And I said, Sergeant Coleman, I'm not joining the Marine Corps to work on airplanes. I'm joining the Marines because I want to be in the infantry. I want to be a machine gunner. And the staff sergeant, who I don't remember his name, that was in charge of the recruiting office, he's like, well, if you want to be, in the combat arms, don't go infantry. Be a tanker. Because he was in tanks. He goes, you don't have to walk everywhere. And I said, nope. I said I want to be 03 infantry. And like. Marine Corps is pretty good about giving me my wish.
Yeah, I bet they were.
They were okay.
So you were determined right from high school that it was Marine Corps for you.
Absolutely. When I was in high school, I was a cadet in the Civil Air Patrol, so I had exposure to the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary, which is the Civil Air Patrol.
Right, yeah.
But I only did that because that was the closest thing I could get to military experience. It was a great experience. I mean, it taught me a lot. It made me a little bit more prepared for boot camp and all that. But I was absolutely determined to be a Marine. In fact, 4 days after graduating high school, I was standing on the yellow footprints at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't waste any time.
I guess not. So you went in what year?
I went in June of '89.
'89.
And I served 4 years, got out in '93.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far did you go? You come out a sergeant?
I came out a corporal, E4. Did not come out a sergeant. I kind of wish I had. At one point, I kind of thought of making the Marines a career. I didn't join the Marines in order to make it a career. I joined the Marines to serve my country,
right.
Number one. And number two, I joined the Marines to prove something to myself. I wasn't involved in athletics in high school. Most Marines are. Most guys, they played football, they wrestled. I did wrestle, and I did a few other things, but I wasn't very good. I was not a very good athlete. So for joining the Marines, earning the title Marine was a big deal for me, and that was my goal, and I checked that box. There's the old saying in the Marines, once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yes.
But there's also another part of it that your Lance Corporal group will say, which is once a Marine, always a Marine, so why re-enlist? So anyways, I did my tour. I did, and got my honorable discharge. To this day, I still love, my Marine Corps. Very proud of it. Now that I'm more involved with the American Legion, I like to not so much focus just on my Marine brethren,
Right.
but all of our veterans,
Right.
because we're all brothers, Army,
Yes,
Navy,
we
Air
are.
Force, Marines, and we'll give each other, especially a Navy guy and a Marine guy, we'll give each other a lot of grief.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to it, it's all honorable service.
Where did you serve when you were in?
So I went through Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego for boot camp. I went through the School of Infantry in Camp Pendleton, California, and I was stationed in Hawaii at the Marine Corps Air Station, Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. Which that's one thing about joining the Marines. There are very few poor duty stations in the Marines.
Right.
A lot of guys maybe not like 29 Palms or maybe Yuma, Arizona, but being an amphibious force, your chances are probably 99% of the time you're going to be somewhere where there's water and it's pretty
Absolutely.
beautiful. Camp Pendleton, Hawaii. I spent or Camp Lejeune if you're an East Coast Marine. I spent most of my time actually though not in Hawaii. I was a 3rd Marines, and I spent most of my time actually in Okinawa, Japan.
Wow.
I did 3 tours to Okinawa, and went to Korea. Of course, I went to the Gulf War, Operation Desert Shield, Operation Desert Storm. We went back to do training prior to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We did training in California. We went to the Sierra Madre mountains, where the Marine Corps has a cold weather mountain warfare training center. They call it Bridgeport, and so we did a month of cold weather mountain warfare training, skiing, snowshoeing, living in snow caves,
Wow.
learning to fight in mountainous, snowy terrain. Went down to 29 Palms, did a combined armed exercise down there, desert training, learning how to fight in the desert, but we did a lot of training in Hawaii, Pahakaloa training area. Learning to fight in mountainous jungle terrain. But 3rd Marines, who I was with, I spent most of my time in 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines. I did my last tour to Okinawa with 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines. Would augment the 9th Marines, who were in Okinawa. And so we would do these 6-month rotations. We call them pumps. We do a 6-month pump to Okinawa. To augment 9th Marines. And so I went to Okinawa twice with 2-3 and once with 3-3.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've been around. We're on the
Yeah.
West Coast anyway.
Yeah, Westpac for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Westpac Marine. Yeah.
Well, okay, so when you got out, what were your dreams? What were you going to do?
That's a really good question. The only thing I really kind of knew that I wanted to do for sure was to move to New Hampshire. My folks are from New Hampshire. The majority of my family is in New Hampshire. And growing up in Southern California, on the other side of the United States, I loved going to New Hampshire, and I loved visiting and having more of the extended family there. And so I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do, other than I wanted to move to New Hampshire and I wanted to settle down here. And so I did. I got out of the Marines in the spring of '93, and I went to UNH in August of '93. Did a semester there, and when I was going to UNH for that semester, I was volunteering on a local volunteer fire department in southern New Hampshire, not here in Wolfeboro, and I thought a little bit of that camaraderie that I had in the Marines, with these other volunteer firemen. I
Sure.
thought, you know what, I could do this full time. This is a lot of fun, and so I actually dropped out of at UNH. I went to the Tech College in Laconia. It's now called Lakes Region Community College. Back then it was New Hampshire Technical College, Laconia.
Right.
And got my associate's degree in fire science, and I became a firefighter, paramedic. Was on the job in Manchester for about 5 years. Unfortunately, I got hurt on the job, and I had 3 of my vertebrae, my lower back fused, and
Wow.
Had to do something else in it. So I became a pilot. That's what I do now. It's my full-time job.
So well, you just kept on serving, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I did. You know, a funny thing is, so one of the things I did as a pilot for 7, almost 8 years is I worked for a company that did military contracts overseas. So I worked in Africa several different times in many different locations through Africa. I worked in Afghanistan. I worked in the Philippines, all supporting U.S. Special Forces. Primarily ODAs, you know, Green Berets, SEALs, MARSOC, which is now called Raider Battalions again. And I was flying the colonel from southern Philippines up into Manila, and I called him up to the front of the airplane to let him sit in the jump seat and see the operation from the front. And we were chit-chatting, and he asked me, you know what my background was, and as well, Marines, firefighter, paramedic, pilot, and he's like, wow, you did a lot of like testosterone-filled jobs. I said, when you ask a 5-year-old kid, a 5-year-old boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he says, I want to be a Marine, I want to be a fireman, right. I want to be a pilot, and I want to be a cowboy. The only thing I haven't done yet, I haven't been a cowboy.
Well, that's quite a jump from being a firefighter to a pilot.
Yeah, there was a lot of training. I had to go. I did all of my flight training down in Florida. Moved away from New Hampshire. Went to Florida, did all my flight training down there, and then I also, while I was down there, this is after 9/11, 2001. So the pilot job market was very depressed at the time. So I went and actually got my aircraft and power plant rating, my aircraft mechanic certifications. So it was after after 9/11, 2001,
right, yep.
and the pilot market, obviously aviation jobs was very depressed at the time. So I actually went and got my aircraft and power plant mechanic certificate, so become an aircraft mechanic. And I've worked as a pilot. I've worked as an aircraft mechanic, primarily as a pilot. And like I said, I spent about 7, almost 8 years doing U.S. military contracts, supporting our forces overseas. And about a year ago, after so many deployments, the opportunity that I have now, that I'm flying a corporate jet that's based in Manchester, came about, and so I was able to get back home, and I was able to get really involved with my community,
right?
Where I was working 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, sometimes 2 months on, 4 weeks off, that sort of stuff. My ability to really enjoy Wolfeboro in my community where we live, and prior to living in Wolfeboro, I lived in Brookfield. And,
yeah.
But this entire community, my prior jobs, it was serving, and it was great, it was fantastic. However, like all deployments, puts pressure on the family.
Right.
And then also I didn't get to enjoy so much Wolfeboro, and so one of the great things about my new position that I've been working in the last year, flying a jet, being based here in New Hampshire, is getting involved with the American Legion.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
You joined the Legion just about after I did, but you really went up. I mean,
Yeah.
You were once sitting where everybody else sits, and then all of a sudden you become adjutant.
Right. Well, I didn't plan it that way. Not at all. So I joined, as you mentioned, I joined just a little after you did, And my very first meeting, when I say joined, I mean join this post.
Right.
For most people that maybe don't understand veterans that aren't members of the Legion, you can join the Legion without becoming a member of a post.
Right.
You get assigned to the state, which is post 200.
Yeah.
And we're post 18.
Right.
So I was already a paid up for life member. We call it PUFL, PUFL, paid up for life member of the Legion when I joined post 18. But now I was going to get involved, and the reason I really wanted to get involved was twofold. One was to be involved with my community and my veterans, but the other reason is my 98-year-old World War II veteran grandfather was a paid up for life member of the American Legion, very active in Post 2 in Manchester, Sweeney Post.
Okay.
And he passed away about that time. And my thought was, if the American Legion was good enough for my World War II veteran grandfather, it's good enough for me. And so part of my wanting to be involved was in honor of not only him, but all of the veterans of the wars prior to mine. I'm a veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, First Gulf War. You start getting old when your war gets a number to it.
Yes.
so I'm a veteran of the First Gulf War, but obviously the World War I veterans who established the American Legion, they've all passed on. We're losing the World War II veterans at a great rate.
I know.
We're losing the Korean War veterans. We're losing the Vietnam War veterans. And one thing about the Legion, I know but just for your viewers, you don't actually have to have served in Vietnam or served in
Right.
Korea or served in overseas in World War II. If you were a member of the armed services during that time, you're eligible
Yep.
to join. And Gulf War veterans, and then all the War on Terror veterans since the Gulf War are eligible, whether or not they went to Afghanistan or went to Iraq or went to Kuwait or not. They're eligible because they
Right.
served our country during a time of conflict. And so anyway, the one thing about our post, so I'm getting back to that first meeting, the commander, was stood up and he says, it talks about, number one, the 100-year anniversary
Right.
was coming up, and then number two, talking about how we might have to turn in our charter because we just don't have, well, two reasons. One, the building, but the Legion isn't a building; it's the people.
Right. Absolutely.
But the membership that didn't seem to be interest in the Legion anymore in Wolfeboro. And being a Marine, one of the things about the Marines, and I don't want to harp on the Marines all the time. It's just my background now. It's hard. Anyway, one of the things about the Marines is they're very big on the history and in boot camp teaching you your history and
Well, your uniform is basically a sign of history.
That's right. So the Marines, people call them devil dogs. That kind of term is actually not as common as it used to be. In German it was Teufelhunden. In World War I, the Marines fought in Europe. In World War II, of course, they were in the Pacific. But in World War I, the Marine Corps fought in Europe. And and I stood up at this meeting. I don't know if you remember.
Yep.
When they talked about closing down our post, turning in our charter, the whole 9 yards. And it just struck me. I was like, wait a second, I just got here. So getting back to Marines in World War I, they show up to this French forest called Belleau Wood. And the French are fighting the Germans. The Germans are routing the French. And the French are on a retreat. And the French commander sees the Marine commander, and he says, the Germans are advancing, you must retreat. And he says, retreat? hell, I just got here.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and then they went on to fight, and it's the Battle of Belleau Wood,
Right.
a very famous Marine battle, and that's the battle where the Marines earned the nickname from the Germans, Teufelhunden, or Devil Dogs, because of the ferocity that the Marines fought in the Battle of Belleau Wood. So that was kind of how I felt when my very first meeting, when we were talking about turning in our charter. Retreat, hell, I just got here. Turning our charter, I just got here. I want to be involved. And we have very great men and women at the American Legion, and our American Legion Auxiliary that also meets there.
Right.
At one point there was 450 members of Post 18,
Yeah.
and now we're down to about 70 members.
Right.
And of those 70 members, there's about 5 that actually show up to meetings and keep the flame going for the organization. Harold Chamberlain. I mean,
Oh.
I know you've had him on your show before,
Right.
and everybody in town knows Harold.
Yeah.
But I bet most people in town don't know how much he does behind the scenes for the town. Jim Collins, Mulholland, Bob Mulholland, Bob DeMario, these guys that have kept things going as the membership has dropped and the participation of the membership has dropped. And they've done it, using a Navy term, they've done a yeoman's job.
Yeah, they really have.
And I really do appreciate everything that they've done. And I thought, well, I can't join an organization and not get involved. So we had the nominations for positions. Commander Harold, Commander Chamberlain says, hey, he's now commander. At the time he was adjutant. He says, you should be the sergeant at arms. So okay, so we voted me into sergeant at arms, but we didn't have an adjutant when the following, through the winter, they said, hey, is there anybody willing to volunteer to be adjutant? And Navy is never again volunteer yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I should have sat on my hands, but I knew I volunteered to be the adjutant and became the adjutant, and I'm very happy to do it. Learning on the job, but the one thing that I really want to do is, and I think we'll segue into this, is to reinvigorate our Legion,
Yeah.
our Legion Post 18 Harriman Hale over there on Center Street. Everybody drives by it,
You can't miss it with the cannon sitting right out there and the sign. It's there.
You'd think so. I think that some people think that we're closed, though, because since I became a member, and I talk to people and they're like, oh, that post is still open. We actually have people that live in Wolfeboro that are members of the Alton Post, which, hey, that's fine.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the commander of the Alton Post lives in Wolfeboro. But there's this feeling out there that the post is closed. And it does. It closes down, or it has in the past. It has closed down during the winter.
Right.
We have now voted to
Keep it open.
Yeah, keep it going through the winter. And it's important for our veterans to have a veterans organization in town. And when I say in town, Wolfeboro, I don't mean to exclude Tuftonboro,
Right.
and Ossipee and Wakefield, Brookfield, Effingham. We're open to. We're not Wolfeboro's post.
Right.
We're Post 18. We're the post for our area. So
But to talk about what you said, that's what happened to me. I mean, I was invited to join the Alton Post,
right.
and I was at the dump one day, and I ran into Harold.
I'm
And
laughing because that's where he recruited me too. But go
you
ahead.
were at the dump as well.
At the dump.
So anyway, he said, well, why don't you join Wolfeboro? And I said, well, I heard Wolfeboro was closed.
Yeah.
And he said, no, we're not closed. So next meeting, I'm there,
That's right. I was. Harold got me at the dump as well. But we need our veterans organization in the town, and I want to talk about that in a little bit about what we do for our town and the surrounding
Okay.
towns. But it was also even more pertinent, I think, in that we're in our 99th year as the American Legion as a national organization, but we're also in our 99th year as a post,
Yep.
Post 18. And so next year, it's our centennial. And of the Legion itself, founded in 1918 in Paris, France, and also of Post 18, which was founded here in Wolfeboro. It wasn't originally on Center Street; it was originally downtown
Right.
Wolfeboro, which is a whole other interesting fact of history, in that the American Legion Post 18 was basically took over the mantle of the veterans organization in the Wolfeboro area
Right.
from the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR, all the Union Civil War veterans. By that point, many of them were dying off, and the roles of the Grand Army of the Republic were shrinking, and Post 18, the American Legion Post, took over that role in town as the veterans organization, and we still have our post on Center Street, our post home. We still have many mementos and artifacts and records and all sort of stuff. It's amazing what is in our possession.
I know.
Of the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic. So our Post 18 is it's important to me as a veteran, and it's important to me as just as a member, or not a member, but a resident of the Wolfeboro area, because of, we'll get into it, the things that the Post does for the community. But it's also, it's important to me. Is the heritage, the GAR, Grand Army of the Republic, then into the Post 18 American Legion, carrying on that heritage of continuing service. We both served. We're service members, but we're continuing to serve our communities in the Legion. Our communities being the communities of veterans, and the community as the community at large. So
Right.
I always tell people, if you have not been into our post home on Center Street, or if you haven't been in there in 30 years, because maybe you went to Halloween parties or dances there at some point. If Norman Rockwell, the great painter of the Saturday Evening Post and all that, if Norman Rockwell was to paint a painting of an American Legion post, it would be Post 18 on Center Street.
Yeah,
I mean,
it would.
it's a beautiful building. It's
Yep.
it's in need of a lot of tender
Lot of
love and
work.
care at this point
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
It is actually very much in danger, and it's one of the things I'd like to talk to today about is our our efforts right now to get going about raising awareness and raising money in order to save this.
To save the building, right.
This, which is really it's a gem for our town. But it's a beautiful building. It was originally, I think, a two-room schoolhouse.
Right,
Has
yep.
this beautiful fieldstone fireplace.
Yep.
It has, I think it was the veterans of the Korean War that built that ante room,
Yeah.
which is gorgeous and full of amazing treasure.
Oh, I know.
That maybe a lot of people in Wolfeboro don't realize that is there. Stuff that goes back, like what we talked about, to the Civil War.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff from World War I on, because obviously the Legion was founded post World War I. So we have this amazing place, and if like I said, if Norman Rockwell was going to paint a Legion post, it would look like Post 18.
So we have plans
We do.
to keep it going.
We do, both in membership, because the post, when it comes down to it, it's not the building, it's the
It's
veterans,
Right.
and obviously to raise funds and to restore our building. So as far as membership goes, at one point we had 450 members of Post 18, and now we're down to around 70, and even less than that, a fraction of that are active. Many of our members have moved to Florida or somewhere south. We have one member that remains active and lives in Nebraska. So some people aren't physically here in New Hampshire anymore, but they maintain their membership at Post 18.
Right.
So the World War II veterans, we covered this a little bit. The World War II veterans we're losing. I heard at one point 1,000 a day, and might be even higher than that
Wow.
now, nationwide. Our Korean War veterans are getting very high, up there in age. Our Vietnam era veterans, such as
I
yourself,
know.
I've got white hair and my war has a number to it. First Gulf War, but so I'm even. Desert Storm veteran. I'm 47 years old, and now we have all of these new veterans, that are in their 20s and 30s. And what we have seen as a Legion is a distinct drop off from after your generation, the
Right.
Vietnam War generation, the Vietnam era veterans. There doesn't seem to be, and maybe in your generation, there was, hey, my dad is a member of the Legion. I got back home from Vietnam. I'm going to become a member of the Legion because my dad was a member, or my uncle, or my mother, or something. And such a smaller percentage of our society, our American society, are veterans anymore.
Right.
And so, because we do have an all volunteer force, which is a good thing. I'm not saying that's not a good thing. However, I think it affects. We have less veterans in total because we don't have a draft, and so maybe there's a little bit less of an inclination to join a veterans organization, whether it's the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW, another fantastic organization, DAV, Marine Corps League. There's of course I'm going to plug somewhat the American Legion because
Right.
I think it's a great organization,
And
but they're all great organizations.
There's a lot of, when you look around Wolfeboro, you see a lot of veterans' license plates.
You do,
So they're obviously proud to be a veteran.
right,
And if we could just say, hey, look, come and talk with us,
right. Well, so we need to reinvigorate our membership, and that's a great point. One of the things that I've brought up in the conversation within our post is our post used to be very, very active. We actually used to have a canteen.
Yep.
Down on Center Street. It's Wolfgang's Pizza.
Right now,
That used to be our canteen.
and he's a veteran.
And he is a veteran. So we had our post home on Center Street where the cannon is, and then we had the canteen. But in the 80s, I guess it was, this was before I even moved to New Hampshire, they closed down the canteen. And I think that's where a lot of our membership left because we're not, a lot of people associate posts with having a bar. We call it a canteen in the Legion.
Yeah.
With having a bar. And there's some posts that's kind of their draw, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Hey, whatever gets veterans together, that's a good thing. We're not a drinking post. We're not a canteen. We don't no smoking in our building. No we don't serve alcohol. But anyways, people are less. They seem to be less inclined to join. But if we invigorate our post, and I've brought this up, that we start doing things that the monthly meetings, like any other organization, you can join any organization you want, and you got to do your regular business meetings, your Robert's Rules of Orders. All in favor say aye, aye, nay,
Yeah.
nay, and all that sort of stuff. It has to be done. That's part of the charter. That's what
Right.
keeps an organization going. But it gets to the point where that's almost all that we do. And so guys are like, go to a meeting. So, but we no longer have the canteen, but now the building itself has gotten to the point where we can't have functions at the building anymore.
No.
The floor is getting so soft that there's worry of that it's going to cave in.
Yeah.
It's not up to life. It's not up to life safety code for gatherings and things
Right.
like that. So since we haven't had those functions, maybe there's not that incentive to join because they don't
Yeah.
want to just do the business meetings. There needs to be more activity, and that goes back to the whole idea of like, oh, that place is still open. We thought it was closed. So if we restore the post, get it where it's a serviceable facility again,
And start having functions.
start having activities and functions and dinners and maybe all these people that are driving around the Wolfeboro area, Tuftsboro, Brookfield, Wakefield, Ospey, that have veterans plates that aren't members of the American Legion, will start joining and start getting involved.
Right. That would be good. That would really be good. Okay, so those are the plans.
Yes.
Now, if someone who's watching would like to get involved with the Legion, you have the number that they can call?
I do. So if people want to get involved, they can get in contact me, adjutantpost18.org. We can make that available on the screen.
Yes, we will.
If they're interested in joining the Legion, reach out to me. My name is Frank Cartier. I'm the adjutant at post18.org.
Or even if they want to learn more about it.
Or go to the dump
And meet Harold.
and meet Harold. And then you get information that way. And not only do we want people to join the Legion, but also veterans in town, even if they're not eligible to be a member of the Legion, if there's a veteran that's in need, either you are the veteran or if there is someone who knows a veteran that is in need, whether or not they're a member of the Legion, still please reach out to us.
Yes.
Because
We're brothers. We'll help.
we will help.
Brothers and
Absolutely.
sisters. We will definitely help.
We will.
Yeah.
The other thing, I know you've had Harold on here as a guest. What I would like to talk about in the, coming up, not only what our town does, or I'm sorry, what I'd like to talk about is not only what our post does for our veterans, but what our post does for our town and what having Post 18 alive and vibrant and active means for Wolfeboro and the surrounding area.
The parades?
The parade. So the Memorial Day service where we start off Brewster Field, we go to the various flags within town, and we hold ceremonies there.
Yep.
And it's almost embarrassing at this point that there's more American Legion Auxiliary, the wives and daughters and sisters of veterans, than actual veterans, members of the Legion. But so the Memorial Day services are put on by our post. Which is technically the Independence Day parade.
Independence Day parade.
Yeah, everybody calls it the 4th of July parade, but Harold will tell you if it rains on the 4th of July and we hold it on the 5th of July, it's still the Independence Day parade. It's not the 4th of July parade.
Right.
Of course, everybody refers to it in town as the 4th of July parade. The Independence Day parade, if you ask the Harold, that's put on by the Legion.
Yep.
And a lot of people maybe don't realize that the effort of planning and organizing and coordinating all of that, for the most part, has really fallen on Harold Chamberlain's shoulders.
Sure has.
And Harold will tell him, himself, he's not a spring chicken, and so that's one of the other reasons I've gotten involved.
Yeah.
So that the parade that everybody, it's the biggest 4th of July parade.
It was huge
Yeah.
this year.
Yeah, and it's such a huge draw. People come from all over. They love it. It's this great outpouring of patriotism and community. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's put on by Post 18 Harriman Hale.
Yep.
The Veterans Day ceremony and activity that we do at
The Wright Museum.
the Wright Museum, that's put on by Post 18 American Legion. All of the flags of veterans, I'm sorry, all the grave sites of veterans in our area, flags are put onto them on Memorial Day by Post 18.
Post 18.
And you talk to Harold about it. There's some grave sites that are very, very hard to get to.
Oh, I know. He's told us that. He's
Yeah.
had to climb over rocks and.
Yeah, but we put the flags there to honor our veterans.
Well, Frank, I wish we could keep on going, but
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I think we're losing our time here.
Okay.
But I want to thank you for coming on. I want to
Clint.
thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And
thank you
again-
for your service, and I thank you for doing this show because
Well-
getting the word out not only for our post but for veterans, it's an important thing. And I appreciate what you're doing. Appreciate your service in the Navy, and I appreciate what you're doing now.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, again, if you want to come on the program and talk about what you did in the service, please call. So thanks again for joining us.